Hey there, how you doing? It's your pal Mike Squires, and this is the Couchless Podcast, episode number 250. And my guest, Guy Davis. Now, Guy Davis is a guy who I've been, loosely connected to for 25, going on 30 years now. A long-ass time. I was introduced to Guy through his playing in a band called Sage, who I later have connections with. I played with another guy from that band. It was a very pivotal moment in my career. Later, he went on to form band Jovi. He's guy is a bass player and a banjoist, an unconventional banjoist. Not he doesn't play the banjo like a bluegrass dude. He uses it as a songwriting tool. And it's really incredible. He used to have this residency at the OK Hotel, and it was awesome. So Band Jovi sort of slowly morphed into Guardian Alien, which our friend Doug Sowers, my first band's drummer, he's in the band to this day playing drums. And now Guy has been playing and touring with Kultur Shock for I don't even remember how many years. Very many years. He talks about how many European tours he's done in this podcast. It's a shitload. He is a supremely talented guy, such a kind and cool dude, and it was a real pleasure to get to know him better because knowing him just sort of casually all these years, there's a lot of stuff I didn't know, and it gets right into it at the top of the podcast. So. And it just doesn't really let up. It's pretty great. So I appreciate him stopping by. Kultur Shock is on tour at the time of the release of this podcast all across Europe. The tour kicked off on April 4th, and it will end on May 1st in Rome. If you are listening from Europe anywhere, check tour dates. You can find tour dates at alternativetentacles.com or at the band's website, or just Google it, you lazy bastards. Just Google it. Good news with Kultur Shock is that there is a rad new single, Country Mohammed, on colored 7-inch vinyl. There's a new album in the works, and Alternative Tentacles is vinyl releasing a bunch of past CD releases that the band never had vinyl releases. So that's amazing. The band is signed with Alternative Tentacles, one of the most legendary punk labels of all time. Again, if you have never seen the band, do go see them. They are incredible. I hope that you enjoy this podcast episode. I loved getting a chance to talk with Guy. If you are enjoying the Couchless podcast or the super fun and, as it's going these days, pretty weird covers that we are doing, please support us on Patreon. I know I say this every episode, but at the moment, your support is needed more than ever. Couchriffs is going to be undergoing a bunch of changes and some big moves, and there's a lot of things changing. Let's just say that. So your support is greatly appreciated. I would very much like to thank Variety Coffee Roasters, varietycoffeeroasters.com, in Brooklyn, New York. Variety Coffee Roasters is killer. I drink it every morning. I just drank a whole Chemex of it already. That's why I'm a lot of run-on sentences. But deal with it. You like coffee? Try coffee. It's great. Variety Coffee Roasters is a fantastic boutique roaster in Brooklyn. As I stated, they have a number of cafes in Brooklyn and in the city, Manhattan. You can, if you don't live anywhere near New York, you can get their coffee online. If you try it and you like it, subscribe. They've got a subscription. Just click the little subscribe button. They ask you a few questions. How often do you want it? What do you like? How much do you want? And it just shows up at your door. You never run out, ever. And that is a gift and a joy. Let me tell you what. Go check out some of their killer merch. We did a limited edition coffee mug a while ago, and if you snoozed, you losed. That's how you say that. I hope you didn't snoozed. Thank you, Variety Coffee Roasters. You guys are great, and I love you. I would also like to look at this coif. See this? I have, the Middleton Hair Company to thank for that. Now, you can get Middleton Hair Company products at thecutby.com. That's thecutby.com. This is Shane Middleton. You may know him from the band Loudermilk, one of the most fucking amazing and under-celebrated bands in the history of rock music. He's down there in Los Angeles with his own salon, and now he's got hair care products. I use his shampoo. I use his conditioner. I use Motion Lotion, which is like a leave-in conditioner. And I use his holding paste. It's killer. It smells great. If you could smell me right now, you would be so stoked. I do not smell like a lady's products. I smell like I should smell. This is the product I've been waiting for. Go check it out. Go try some, buy some, order it online. The Cut By. If you don't live in LA, you can get it online. You heard of the online? That's where you find it. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Middleton Hair Company. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I love doing this podcast. It is going to mean a lot more to me very soon. And so, I say thank you. Now, don't forget the golden rule, okay? Treat people the way you want to be treated. It's not that hard. Just don't be a dick. This is the biggest dog. He's the biggest. You can't find a bigger dog than this. Yeah. Not around here. Of course, he doesn't think so. Guy Davis.
Yep.
Welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to Couch Riffs.
Thank you. It's good to be welcomed.
It's
good to talk to you.
I'm so happy to see you. We've known each other for a long time. We don't know each other like super like deeply. And so I'm looking forward to learn a lot of shit about you that I don't know today.
Me too. Me too. Was it 94?
Must have been around then.
95?
I got to Seattle in 93.
Okay, I think it was 93. I think it was right when you got back, right when you got to Seattle.
I mean, I immediately started playing with Doug, like within the first 5 months of getting to Seattle.
Which version of playing with Doug was that? Early Eat the Feeling?
Yes.
Ah, okay. With Dan and Joe.
Yeah. For people listening, we're talking about Doug Sowers. People have heard me talk about this on the podcast, that I showed up to Seattle a guitar player, but was like the uncoolest looking and gear owning and playing guitar player Seattle could possibly host.
Fresh out of the Marines?
Yep.
Which I also, by the way, never knew that. Never, ever knew anything about that part of your life.
Oh, yeah. Well, we all do things.
Let's pause there for a second about Doug Sowers, because he is such a marvelous person and one of my favorite drummers, and was such a hub of connecting so many people. And so I met Doug through Sage playing with Eat the Feeling, which is how I met you. But he also had the cart that he ran, the Solstice cart on Broadway.
I worked there.
Which was this hub. And what Doug and our relationship started with us playing demos on tape cassette to each other at the cart in the mornings, waking up and going for coffee. And the amazing thing about Doug was he would get up at 4:30 and go wheel that thing out for all us losers and partiers who were getting up whenever, and we'd roll up to Broadway and get our amazing latte from him. And then we would rock each other demos on a tape cassette. And it was just, such a era of Capitol Hill, 93 Broadway,
Doug employed me there at that coffee cart and later at the cafe in the U District. Also was a huge part of my musical education, because I was just, not a very good heavy metal guitar player who was like vaguely interested in punk rock, could kind of, was into the Butthole Surfers and Jesus Lizard and Helmet and that kind of era of 90s gnarlyism.
Yeah.
And he was just like,
Yeah.
check this out. Check this out. And also I was playing bass. So I had to lie my way into that band. I told him I'm a bass player. And he was like, awesome, because he was the
Because
guy
we
that,
need one.
yeah, we need a bass player. And I, he said that to me, and I was like, I'm a bass player. Full lie.
You're
Full
right.
lie.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I borrowed stuff. I learned all the songs on his demo cassette. I showed up to rehearsal, and then they were
was
like,
that at Chop House, by the way? That was when they had the room at Chop House. And I think Dan and Doug were living there at various eras of that time.
It was
and both of them at one point.
Well, they were living in a van and then showering at the Chop House and at the gym.
Saving money for that European trip they took.
They say, I mean, I thought it was wild at the time, but then they went on this like months long train trip across Europe. And it was just like,
and to Turkey, and
who's the genius now?
Totally.
So yeah, I lied my way into that band, and then, quickly had to, I could play those songs because I tried very hard. I very, very much wanted to be in a band. And then I had to sort of fess up and be like, I'm a guitar player and I don't even own a bass. And Doug, and this wasn't even the last time Doug helped me get my first bass. Like, I took my stuff to wherever we went. You know what?
The first bass, that is a really special thing. Who gave you your first bass? Rob Williamson from My Name, Lucky Me, gave me my first bass.
Really?
And yeah, when I I think Rob was probably my biggest inspiration to be a bass player. I think that I was interested in music and I knew how to play guitar a little bit, but I really from the beginning wanted to be a bass player. And Rob gave me an electric bass, and I learned by ear. I just played to tunes that I liked. And I really feel like from the beginning, I was a bass player.
Wait a minute. Are you from Seattle?
No, I was born in San Francisco, and at the age of 5, moved to Sao Paulo, and then moved to Hong Kong, and then went to high school in Jakarta, Indonesia, and moved here as an 18-year-old to go to the University of Washington briefly, which is where I met Mike Williamson and Mark Olson from Sage. But I first met Mike Williamson and Rob, and Mike was one of those guys who just went to all the shows, and he would just drag me. He'd be like, this show's going on. For example, we saw Primus at their first show in Seattle at the Vogue on a Tuesday night when the guitar player was still underage, and there was like 16 people there,
Right.
And then afterward, they're like, all Les Claypool wanted to talk about was where the good fishing spots were around, Seattle. And so Mike took me to so many great shows like that in those days. And a lot of the shows we went to were My Name, who was such a cool band, just really intense, heavy band. And they were really influenced by All and toured with All quite a bit, but they were a big influence on me just as energetically in terms of what I felt like I needed to express through performing.
Wait, let me back up for a second. Which of your parents had the either governmental job or military job?
Yeah, so we never really figured it out. I mean, ostensibly, so my dad is a farm boy from Central Oregon. My mom's a Portland girl. And I'm named after my grandfather. And I am literally a third generation mill worker. My dad worked in the Madras mill. His dad was a janitor at the high school, a lumberjack, a farmer. My dad put himself through college as he rose pigs. He was a pig farmer, and then he went to Portland State and at Corvallis, and got a degree in computer science, right? Back when everybody was like, that's okay, you think that punch cards thing is going somewhere. And then they moved to, they had my older brother Steve and moved to San Francisco and he got a job at IBM when they were doing punch cards. And he developed this punch card system for processing checks. And so I was born in 1968 in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my dad was sort of this weird executive gypsy where he, you know, grew pot in the closet and made stained glass and dough for abalones. But he was also on this corporate path, which I really respect because he came from basically nothing. And this is what he wanted to do. And so he took all these oddball assignments overseas, the first one being Sao Paulo, Brazil, where he's
still
like
for IBM?
For IBM. He was a career IBMer.
Wow.
And so we were in Sao Paulo for 3 years. We moved back to the Bay Area for a second and then moved to Hong Kong. Sorry, we moved from Sao Paulo, Brazil to Hong Kong. And I was always in international schools overseas. And then we were back here for a second in the Bay Area for a year. Then we moved to Seattle for a year, which is where I first knew of Seattle's existence, was just 1 year living here in Seattle. And then we moved to Jakarta in the middle of 8th grade, where I went to high school. And I was really at the end of that 5-year stint, I was just done with being other than where I came from. And I just felt like I was missing out on this glorified American youth. And I graduated from high school early to come move back here and quickly realize what a sack of crap that all was.
Right.
And I was like, oh my God, I left halfway through my senior year to just come and be in, the Northwest in the wintertime, and started going to the UW. It was severe culture shock. And, but all those years in all those cultures taught me a lot. One, that America's not the center of the world. Two, money doesn't make you happy. There's a lot of happiness out there without a cent in your pocket. Three, all that music, all those different scales and time signatures and everything, that's immediately what I was drawn to in playing.
How much of that do you think you absorbed? Because you weren't playing music yet. Is that right?
No, I wasn't. Well, I really wanted to. And unfortunately, my family, my dad was a pretty hardcore dude. He was like, music is for losers, There's
right.
And I had to buy a flea market. We weren't poor, and I had.
How many times in your life have you thought, "Fuck, Dad was right"?
Well, no, he was right. He absolutely was right. He was 100% right. But
proud.
For me, it was a tool. It became a tool for. There's no more effective way to express what you can't express in any other way. And that's what it was for me, was a way to get this shit out that was inside. And that's what I discovered in Mill Valley as a 12-year-old kid. I had this guitar teacher, and immediately what I was drawn to was chords and singing a song and writing some words down and writing a song. And so I had this flea market guitar that I would plug into the home stereo. And I kind of just dinked around through middle school and high school, but I was really into athletics in school. I was a really good student, and I didn't prioritize that. But the second I got to Seattle and, started smoking weed and being influenced by all this amazing music that I was going to see, and had this background of things that I'd heard, I realized that I had, I connected with it, and I immediately was always drawn to writing. Before I could even play well, I had things that were coming out that I wanted to write. So
in junior high school, you had a guitar. What kind of stuff were you listening to? What was the stuff that had your attention that you were excited about?
So let me tell you about that, because it was major. In Sao Paulo, all that Brazilian music just went in deep. I know now from listening to the music, and at the time we spoke fluent Portuguese. Me and my brothers like learned the language so quickly. Of course, the second we moved to Hong Kong and we're surrounded by Cantonese, we forgot it immediately. But the music, there was that Brazilian music, but like on the turntable was Dark Side of the Moon, whatever the Beatles album was in 1972 and 3. I mean, that music was so vital, and it was just my parents had it on rotation.
Right.
And then in middle school, I mean, wow, Back in Black came out, Van Halen, Queen, just so much solid music. Neil Young. There was just it was really pivotal. It didn't.
You're talking this is like 1981.
This is 19.
You're 13.
So, yeah, I'm 12 and I'm 13. 1981, and I'm in a really interesting part of the world because I'm living in Mill Valley, but I'm going to Mill Valley Middle School. It's a public school. So half my friends were all these black kids from Marin City. My best friend, David Jerson, was a kid from Marin City. And then there were all these sort of like, at the time, Mill Valley was like a middle class white sort of area. And so there was this totally integrated middle school with just this, on the skirts of San Francisco, with just this revolution of music coming out. Like, I'll never forget hearing the first chords of Back in Black, as a little kid riding my BMX around, middle school. Like,
me too.
That's just big. And another one, Bites the Dust from Queen. I remember
Skate Rink classic.
Yeah, I've Been a Miner for a Heart of Gold from Neil Young, I think came out that year. Or maybe I heard it for the first time, but also a lot of like disco and R&B was kind of on heavy rotation too in my periphery, not so much in my house.
I was in the Bay Area at that time also. And I remember around that time.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I was born in Concord. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I lived there before I moved to Washington. But I remember Tom Petty was on the radio a lot. Refugee was a big song.
Kansas, the Cars.
I remember that all of the Iranian refugees I thought refugee was a dirty word. I thought it was a bad word. I didn't understand. It was 10, because, you heard about it on the news, and then maybe some family members, God, refugees, weird. So we were we had close calls back then. So, okay. Tell me about living in Jakarta.
So Jakarta was really wild. The most populous Islamic country on the planet.
Yeah.
At the time, fairly tolerant, although none of the girls at our high school could ever wear shorts in public. For example, we had bomb barricades at the school. But there was a lot of freedom there. I was driving as a 14-year-old through this crazy city. Jakarta now has a population of, I think, like 17 million or something. I think at the time it was 8 million people. And a lot of freedom and no drugs, right? Like, I had to sign a contract to not smoke, not take any drugs, or it was the death penalty, like literally. Yet there was this little oasis called Bali where you could go to a cafe like I did with my first love and my best friends, and we ordered a purple milkshake and tripped on the beach under a full moon in Bali for like 6 hours. So there was that weird dichotomy of Bali was this world where anything could happen, but then the rest of Indonesia was very intolerant. Yet we could go to taverns and drink beer as like 15, 16-year-olds.
So they were alcohol tolerant, but drug intolerant.
Alcohol tolerant, drug. Of course, if you're Islamic, if you're a Muslim, you don't drink. So a lot of people didn't drink at all. But if you're a foreigner, you drank, and there were bars where they served foreigners alcohol, and
Yeah.
there was really good beer. And but there were also these tape shops where you could buy any music for like $1, and they were
Bootlegs.
all pirate tapes. And you could go into these. There was a place called Block M where you could go down, and so we'd go down there on the weekends, and there was just like every album ever released to that day, and all the new shit was everywhere. And you just put in the cassette, you could listen to it, and then go home with any of the tapes. So music was huge.
Do you still have some of those?
I do, actually.
Oh,
I
that's
have
amazing.
them in a box over here.
That's amazing.
And there was no television, no movies. You couldn't buy videos. For videos were illegal. You could occasionally find a black market shop where you'd have to go through a front store that was like a fake pet shop, and then go through a curtain to the back, and you would rent those pirate videos where somebody flew to Singapore and watched a movie in a movie theater and filmed it on the camcorder. And so you'd see people's heads, in the movie, and that was it. So Jakarta was also really gorgeous when you got out of the city. We got to spend a lot of time in the water.
Have you been back as an adult?
I went back once just as I was starting to play music, and it freaked me out so bad that I vowed to never return, because Java felt like it was on the brink of just full chaos and anarchy, which is hilarious because that was 1991.
Right.
And you can imagine what it must be like now. And a lot of my peers from the time have like stayed there and gotten married and have families. Yeah, I would like to go back, but it was also sort of heartbreaking to see what happened to Bali, because I got to experience Bali before it was destroyed by Javanese business people and Australian business people, and just basically totally overrun.
How, in all of your international living as a kid, how much sort of, so you weren't living like on a base, you were living just out as a citizen. Was it a gated community, or were there campuses that IBM had or anything?
Say that again?
Were they campused, sort of like apartments, or did you just have a house in town?
No, we just lived. So, for example, in Sao Paulo, we just lived in a neighborhood. It was probably, an affluent neighborhood, not like a wealthy neighborhood, but like a upper middle class neighborhood by local Brazilian standards. And so our neighbors were Brazilian. And in Indonesia, it was definitely like we lived in this neighborhood called Pondok Indah, which I think believes it translates.
You made that word up.
Pondok Indah. And so a lot of our neighbors in that neighborhood, it was not a gated community. We had like a kampong, which is like a village like across the street. And it was a new development area. So we had a mix of Indonesian and foreigner neighbors. And then in Hong Kong, we just lived in an apartment with other Hong Kong citizens, and mostly Cantonese is what you would call them.
So unlike a military kid, you got a much richer international experience as a kid.
It was pretty embedded. Yeah. I spoke, when I was in Cantonese is really hard to learn, and because it was a British colony, everybody spoke English anyways. So you didn't need to learn Cantonese. In Indonesia, I spoke pretty decent Indonesian, but a lot of people also did speak English, and Indonesian is really easy to learn. So it was pretty embedded. I was definitely immersed in the culture and influenced by the culture.
Wow.
And it was really valuable. It saved me from being an idiot, or more of an idiot than I am.
Well, so you also learned a lot about traveling that a lot of Americans don't have that privilege, or that, they don't get that experience as a young person, seeing, like some friends of mine just went to Mexico with their kids, and they're like, we love Mexico, but they were at a, they were at a place where there was like 6 restaurants, it's gated, there's pools, and it's just Disneyland, right? It's like
Yeah,
a
that's
water park and go, it's
yeah,
like
you're
a
not.
resort.
Yeah,
That's not
yeah.
Mexico, right? And that's
Right.
unfortunately so many Americans experience traveling, even grown-ups our age, who I respect and know to be intelligent. They're like, I won't go to Mexico. I'm like, why the fuck not? I'll go to Mexico right now. Let's go. Let's go to Mexico City. Let's go to Oaxaca. Let's go.
Well,
Let's
the crazy
live.
thing is, there is almost no place more dangerous than the U.S. of A. with the
Right.
amount of shootings that we have. I mean, people get scared. They hear about little cartel action happening there and here and there in Mexico, and it's like it's literally nothing compared to the mass shootings that we
It's
have
nothing
in our own,
compared to going to any Walmart here on any given day.
or anywhere outside the house. I mean, my
Right.
neighbor got murdered, 2 blocks over. My entire family was traumatized by a police action pre Black Lives Matters. Like, our neighbor was murdered by the fucking Bellevue SWAT police, period. And his body was
Wow.
laid out in front of our doorstep. It was wrong, unjust, everything about it. The thing that scares me the most about Americans is that less than 50% of us have passports. And I think we're even more isolated than we ever were. Yeah, you got one.
I,
And
I keep
and
it
I
close.
do feel so blessed to have had the background of travel, because one, it has allowed me to survive on tour.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what your tour life has been like, but the Culture Shock tours are hardcore, overnight drives, like lots of shows in a row, and just having the tools in the background to be able to survive on the road is really important. And I've always had an appreciation for travel with a mission, right? So when we were living overseas, our mission was that dad was working and we were there to go to school and survive and be part of the family. And it wasn't like we're just traveling for traveling's sake. And that's what I love about being in a band and traveling around the mission of the band, to bring music to
Right.
people in all these different cities and countries. And I not done a great job, partly through, I guess, a little not having the means so much to take 4 kids anywhere that we would maybe want to go. My kids have not traveled as much as I would like to have exposed them to, but also because I don't see a lot of value in just taking my children somewhere and just like walking around and gawking and stuff. Like, I'd rather like volunteer or have a mission or engage in something.
Right.
And have a purpose for the travel other than just like, oh, let's go observe, let's go be tourists. I really dislike the tourist concept quite a bit, even though I know it's important for a lot of economies, and I support it. And I definitely don't look down on other people who enjoy that, and going and experiencing other cultures. But yeah, it's a really great, I love traveling in a band and seeing places through that lens.
What a great way to visit a place, because you are it's a way that you can interact with people, with locals, where you are not a tourist and you're not, as a tourist, you are, often perceived as a person. What can I get from this person?
Yeah, you're
How am I
behind
going
the
to take
curtain.
advantage of him? You
Yeah,
know, you're there as a performer, and so you are a friendly. You're an
yeah,
ally. You show up, and a lot of people would love to show you around their place. They
yeah,
want you to love where they live because they do. Let me show you
totally.
how great this place is,
Yeah,
and that's amazing.
yes, yeah, it is, and it really breaks down the barriers. Like I think as a tourist, it's a us and them kind of thing. But when you're there traveling and people are there for your music, and it's all around music, you just realize that we're all one people on this thing.
Yeah.
Culture is important. I have had conversations with people where they're like, no, my heritage and my culture is really important to me. And I've learned to respect that, because
Yeah.
I do not feel like I come from any culture. I do not. I'm from the US. We're all mutts anyways. And I grew up all over the place. So I don't really relate to being an American even. But through my time traveling through all the different countries that I've traveled through.
White Americans love to appropriate everything, even including that. I'm proud of my heritage. Oh, really? What are you?
Well,
I'm
yeah.
Irish and French and German. Okay, so you're Euro honky.
No, but this is really interesting.
Well, but what is your heritage?
Exactly. What is your heritage? And as a result, because I don't believe in American heritage, I would look to other cultures and say, no, your culture doesn't have any value. But people would tell me, no, my culture totally does have value.
Yeah.
And I've learned to respect that and go, you know what? You're right. Your culture does have value, but it doesn't mean that you're better than anybody else.
I would like to add that America is not an unredeemable place. I think that if people just recognize that, just what you said, like, here we are, we come from all over the place. Some of us showed up yesterday. Some of our relatives showed up 200 years ago. But, you know, the heritage is...
And don't get, I think that's not me now. You know, like, I really love this country, and I really love being an American, a United States citizen.
Yeah.
And I have a ton of respect for the sacrifices that have been made over the years, and a ton of respect for our systems of law and governance, actually, and however insanely flawed it can be. I think the underlying premise is really strong, and I think that a lot of people are doing really important work and have their heart and soul in it to make our country a better place and the world a better place. So it's not that I'm down on America. I'm living here I intentionally have chosen to make this my home. I could live in other places, you know? And so I do love it here, but I also am a strong believer in that there's a lot more that makes us alike than, you know, different.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of gnarly stuff happening in the world because of differences of opinion of who belongs to what and what ideologies are at the core of things. Pretty scary stuff.
Yeah.
The alliance between Russia and China right now has me extremely concerned. My brother, you know, part of my family lives in Taiwan. And in fact, last night I had a nightmare that Putin had put out a hit list. And he put out, like, I plan to kill these people. And it was like this list of about 20 people. And Biden was on the list. But also, there were also some other people on it. And a couple of them were my friends. And I remember just thinking, wow.
You have really important friends.
Yeah. Well, they weren't. They were like in the dream, they were eco-terrorists or something like
right.
that. But yeah.
Let's talk about, let's get back to music and your musical history rather than our socio global political views. Although I'm sure people are still with us. People love this shit, man. Right, people? So when you got to Seattle, it's 88, 87?
86.
86. Wow.
Yeah. So I was a graduating class of 87. Okay. I moved here in the winter of 86 because I was like, fuck this. I'm missing my American youth. And I got here and got smacked. And I got into the UW and I was going to start in the fall. And in that winter time, that 6 months, it turns out very smartly, or whatever you would say, intelligently, so took some classes at Bellevue Community College, which got me a leg up on classes at the UW. But I only lasted it, and then I started at the UW. At the time, I was really into climbing in the mountains, and I got very into big wall climbing, alpine climbing, mixed climbing. I climbed El Cap and Half Dome and did some crazy stuff up in Canada. But it was also merging with Sage was launching. And so I did a full year at the UW. During that year, I met Mike and Rob Williamson and Mark Olson, the guitar player for Sage. Sage really started launching that second year of college, my sophomore year, really
so
quickly.
88, you are in a
So
band already?
80, no, I think 89 must have been my sophomore year where we really started to play a lot. And I think 90 must have been 89, 90 must have been sort of the launch of Sage. And so we started playing like house parties, Peace Heathens, fundraisers and stuff like that. Like Vivian would organize a Gasworks Park, who went on to start Hemp Fest.
Yeah.
These protest rally gigs. And then we started playing club shows, and then we just started playing regionally a lot. And it just got to the point where I could, I stopped going to the UW. I think Mike had gone for a second, but wasn't going to school when Sage started, and either had Mark.
I guess it was 93 before I saw Sage play. So, but by that point, you were quite a bass player. How did you find time to sort of hone your skills while you were working, climbing, going to school, and learning how to play the bass to be in this band?
So
Because
we
what a
played.
crazy thing.
Yeah. Well, when I reflect on it, it was a very condensed amount of time. And I think that first year in college, I was still really into climbing. And I ended up taking time off to paint and raise money to go climb in the summer season in Yosemite. And so that must have been the summer of 1990 when I climbed El Cap and Half Dome by some really interesting routes, Zodiac on El Cap and Northwest Face Direct on Half Dome. And I was climbing with these British climbers. And then I did a month on an ice cap in the Mount Waddington range and climbed Mount Waddington in British Columbia. And I had an experience there, a near-death experience that really, like, after that climb and that near-death experience, I was like, okay, I want to play music. I really, like, it just inspired me so intensely to be faced with my mortality and just go, wow, of all the things that I wanted to do in my life, I realized I want to play music. And so I remember Fred Becky, who's a famous local climber, invited me on an expedition to India. And that was the big pivotal point where I was like, nope, I'm going on the Sage path. I could go on the mountain path or the Sage path. And I took the Sage path. And as far as learning, I think that one thing was my physicality, like the tactile experience of rock climbing and the finger strength and just the physical strength really gave me a lot of capability on the bass, like just the physicality of it. So I had a lot of ability. And then it was just about, we just played continuously. Like I ran into Bob Beer, who was an old roommate of ours. And I lived in this group house in, Wallingford. And, we played in and this neighbor commented like, you guys were in the basement all the time, every day for hours. We just played for hours every day. And we're just writing and tweaking on stuff. And I think that's how I became the bass player that I am, just by playing all the time. And one thing that besides those really early couple of months where I was like listening to Voivod, for example, and learning the bass lines.
Yeah.
I really, as soon as I knew how to play, I put and I think this did not benefit me. I think it allowed me to generate my own voice for songwriting and tonality, but I really tried not to listen to any of my contemporaries. So I was sort of, and Sage was a little insular in that way. Like we were kind of oblivious to everything else that was going on around us.
Well, you didn't
So like
sound like anything else.
yeah, and we didn't, and that was really like I always really put a lot of value on sounding super unique. But like when I was later on playing with Matt Chamberlain, we were in several bands together. I just had no appreciation for what he had done already, like how huge of a deal he was and how big some of the other bands in Seattle were in those days. I was just oblivious to it. And I also just didn't put a lot of value on the monetary or even the audience part of the equation. For me, it was all about the music and what we felt and thought about what we were playing.
You guys also did some psychedelic drugs while you played.
Yeah, it's funny because I ran into Jeff and Gary yesterday, and I think that and they brought that up. They're like, yeah, you guys would bring mushrooms to shows, and you would like dose the crowd, and you guys would be high on mushrooms. And I think that was a little blown out of proportion. Like it didn't happen very often. I think definitely I played on mushrooms a few times, but not as often as one might think. And I know Mark and Mike both really, Mark barely ever did much of anything. And so there have been times, and yes, we did do that.
Yeah.
But not that often.
For people who are listening who are not from Seattle, I think most Seattle people that are our age or in any sort of window of our age know what Sage sounded like, probably saw the band, probably were our fans. But would you describe in your, I have an idea of what I think the band sounds like. Will you describe in your words what Sage was?
So Sage was a confluence of influences. Mark came from sort of, he was raised in Yakima, and he was like exposed to a lot of country music and was a really good technical guitar player and a Mark Knopfler fan, but also a fan of really eclectic French poetry, for example. And I just, my whole approach to bass and scales was completely unschooled, no rules, and Eastern sounding in nature. And we had a lot of energy, so we were a trio. So I think at our core we're a rock, I would say a psychedelic rock trio. Ways we would describe ourselves as psycho rockabilly was a term that we used. And just a lot of thrown in odd time signatures.
Yeah.
Interesting scales, non-traditional song structure, but always with a strong value placed on songwriting and a narrative that was important to us. So a lot of the songs really do have messages imbued in them and stories.
And you guys would sing in unison off sometimes.
We would sing,
as well,
we
right?
would do that we would do a lot of harmony, actually. And it was a harmony that just felt really natural to us. And what is it called? It's that fourth, it ends up being, it's like a fifth below, but it ends up being a fourth.
Right.
But yeah, we sang mostly in unison, actually. And the mostly worked out where I brought in a certain number of songs, Mark brought in a certain number of songs, and we wrote a lot of songs together. So like Forked, for example, was co-written. Freddie was co-written. And then there would be songs like Chongwo, which I wrote by myself, and songs like uh, what would be a good example of a KC, where that about Kurt Cobain's suicide that Mark wrote. And we only got to release 2 albums, and about a third were Guy songs, a third were Mark songs, and a third were songs we wrote together. And it seemed like a really natural balance of, and then of course we wrote our parts on each other's songs and influenced where those songs ended up.
I mean, I am not surprised to hear that you grew up traveling around the world so much, because I had both of your records. I don't remember the names of the songs though. I'm sorry, but I remember you sang a song in Spanish.
Yeah,
right?
Compadre.
That's
Yeah.
right. I'm not imagining that.
I think we might have a couple songs in Spanish.
And like musically, there were definitely there were some Eastern leaning things, not a lot of power chords, like big spaghetti Western guitar playing, Mark played those big box
Mark
guitars.
The hollow body Gretches.
What a fantastic band to see live.
Really special.
You guys eventually made it. Oh, well, the crowd was in it.
Yeah.
Right? The crowd was in it.
Yeah.
What did
when you say what a special band to see live, what do you mean? And what, so you got to see us?
Yeah, absolutely. A few times.
And do you remember what venue?
I saw you at the Weathered Wall.
So you saw our CD release party at the Weathered Wall for Fort.
I saw you at Mo.
With Image.
Yeah. Oh, fuck, I love Image. I saw you at Mo. And I want to say the Crocodile or OK Hotel, one of those 2 places.
Mm-hmm. Played all those venues a lot.
But going in the progress from playing house shows to headlining, club shows in Seattle, as a young person, like getting your first musical experiences, that's very formative. How did you feel at that time? Did you feel invincible? Did you feel this is all temporary? Who knows what's going to happen?
It felt completely overpowering, like being possessed by a thing, by a entity that was Sage. And the band was so much more than us and the music. I feel like it was that saying of the sum is greater than the parts. It was the crowd. It was the time. It was probably energetically another layer on top of it. And it was so intense. I remember being miserable because of how intense it was and how we agonized over every aspect of the music. It was never about the shows or the money or the people or how much we played, how often we played. It was it was literally how agonizing and important the music was for us. Like it was visceral. And I remember, so the transition from playing house parties to bigger shows, it just seemed supernatural. I don't mean supernatural, it felt very natural.
Yeah.
And we were making really great revenue. I mean, we would play a headlining show at the venues, and in those days, they just took the bar and gave you all the door money, And so we had a great cash flow, and we were just playing constantly. And we just had this great circuit of playing, Bellingham, Portland, Tacoma, Seattle, Eastern Washington, Pullman, Walla Walla. Portland. And we would do runs down the coast and, you know, play Eugene and occasionally Ashland and for sure San Francisco quite a bit. And played a lot in Seattle. You know, we probably played in Seattle and Tacoma. Man, I would have to say 8 to 10 times a year, and was never, you know, never felt like overplaying. It was just always, and it was just always this combination of bands. It wasn't just us. It was always this great spread of really vital music. It's so many amazing bands from, you know, Seattle, Washington, but also Portland a lot of the time. And it was very continuous until we got signed to Warner Brothers, and we, you know, as a result, got a booking agent, and then they told us we couldn't book our own shows, and then basically got shelved. And that's a whole nother story that we could delve into now or later. But basically, Warner Brothers was, I found out later, they didn't even tell us at the time, getting sued over the whole Tipper Gore explicit lyrics thing, because Interscope was a sub of Warner Brothers and Death Row Records was a sub of Interscope, and the U.S. government was suing Death Row Records over all the gangster rap music, and Warner Brothers didn't release anything for like 18 months at that time, right after we got signed. Wow. They were about to release Seventh Standard Road. And so we went from just basically we were like a hot rod engine in a hot rod vehicle that was built around playing and performing music. We just spent a year writing, recording, releasing this album, and then we didn't even get to tour on it. We didn't even get to play our local circuit on it. And we just kind of lost it after 6 months of literally not getting to do anything. And broke up, and that's when, you know, Mark was like, "Hey, I want to go do my solo thing." And
yeah. Do you think that there were cracks in the foundation already? Do you think that stuff would have inevitably happened, or do you think that the band's demise most certainly came? I mean, certainly it was accelerated. That end point was accelerated, right, by the record deal. But do you think that it was probably coming anyway?
No, I don't think it was. And whether we would have survived the next stage, I think it's really a miracle when a band can survive fame and wealth. Yeah. I don't know if I could have survived it, or, you know, psychologically or mentally. I think Sage could have, and I'm also going to say maybe still could be a really well-known band. The one thing about Sage was we broke up like literally the year the internet started. Right. So if we had literally just lasted a couple more years, our repertoire would have been more documented and more available. Because I think a lot of people just have no idea who we are.
Right.
And but no, I don't think it was inevitable. I do know that I felt like I was going to die, and it wasn't because, you know, none of us were drug addicts or anything weird or extreme, but the touring the lifestyle was pretty extreme. There was a lot of all night drives. There were a couple of people nodding off at the wheel incidents.
It's treacherous.
Losing control on ice and stuff.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, I never wanted to do anything else than play music and write a good song. And the only reason I have built a business and learned how to participate in the capitalist system is because I had children. And I think I really needed to have children to actualize myself as a person in the world, as a soul. My mission in life really was to bring these people to the world, these 4 amazing children that I have, and learn from them and my partner and wife, Lauren. And I think now I can survive being a musician. I do survive. I've had this amazing, there was this period, there was this point where I was like, it was like because Sage kind of went into Guardian Alien, as you know, and then Guardian Alien, which has never stopped.
Wait a minute. Once Sage ceased to be, you had a residency at the OK Hotel, and I saw you there as well.
Right.
And were you performing under your name first, or were you performing under Jovi?
No, so I was performing under just, I think, Yug Savad, which is just my name backwards, or G.D. Avis, or Maurice Caldwell Jr. had some funny names for me, and this was right around when so Guardian Alien started as a songwriting project, that half written on bass and half written on banjo. And I started playing banjo with Sage because Mark could always just twang on his hollow body guitars wherever we were. And the bass is just so lame to play, not an acoustic bass, right? So I found this banjo, started playing banjo. Banjo really, this specific banjo is this Zephyr style banjo from England that has this extra low G drone string. So I could play my weird like Eastern stuff on it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is really happening. So that's where Guardian Alien spawned from, is that songwriting project. But what I was playing in that residency in the OK Hotel front bar stage was this weird banjovi thing, which was bass pedals, where I was playing the bass lines with my feet and banjo. Yeah. And then that morphed into Mike Stone came and played on drums, and Patio Furniture from, oh God, what was her band's name? Sativa? Was that there? And then various musicians, and then Banjovi kind of morphed into Guardian Alien. I started doing the Guardian Alien thing live. And, but that sort of happened for a few years. And then I met Lauren, we had Sadie, I started having children, and then, living on Broadway wasn't very cool with a child. So we figured out how to buy a house, moved to Columbia City. And I remember really thinking, wow, okay, I guess this music thing's over. I've got kids, I'm doing construction, I'm still playing shows with Guardian Alien and stuff. And then Gino Sergin from Kultur Shock, who I met. So there was a period of time in there, Mike, that was really pivotal for me, and something that somebody gave to me, a profound gift. And one of them was Chris Novoselic, who helped me record Banjovi and Guardian Alien, and was a good friend for a little while, and actually took Guardian Alien on a US tour with his band called Isa Drift, who was a great band. It had Bud Gaw on the drums from Sublime, and Kirk Kirkwood on guitar. So Guardian Alien did a tour, and he also recorded me in Christopher Thorne's studio, the guitar player from Blind Melon. He had this amazing studio on Capitol Hill. And so there was this period of time where I was doing some really cool stuff, but I didn't really get it off the ground anywhere in any direction. And but Chris in 1996 introduced me to this wild person named Gino Banana, was his famous name from Yugoslavia. And Chris called me one day, said, hey, I've got this friend, Gino, he needs a show. He's a refugee from the war in Sarajevo. And, I heard, you told me you're playing at Jules Mays. Can they open up for you? And so in 1996, Kultur Shock opened up for Guardian Alien. And this was right when Sage was breaking up. It was actually right during that time when Warner Brothers was like, oh, we're not releasing your album. We haven't booked you a tour. There's no information. And so we were all kind of doing this other stuff. Mark, I guess, was starting Suttree, and was that what it was called?
That was his first solo band. Yeah.
That was that first solo thing. Yeah. And so we were kind of just keeping ourselves busy and inspired. And that's when I met Gino. And so Gino and I became friends, where I loved Kultur Shock. I'd go to their shows. We'd play Guardian Alien, Kultur Shock, shows together. I never thought I would ever be in the band. We never talked about playing music together, but we would go to each other's shows and hang out the next day and have really honest conversations about the shows. That was the foundation of that relationship with Gino. And I remember, and he had monster bass players, Brad Hauser.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Just one of my favorite.
Do you have a Critters Buggin' shirt on?
And I'm wearing a Critters Buggin' shirt right now, which I got at the last Critters show. I saw a lot of their shows. In fact, Sage and Critters Buggin' first show was with Sage at the Rock Candy in 95. I remember.
I saw them a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I love that band so much and all the players. And so we would play a lot of shows together, and we would hang out the next day and talk, and we'd go to each other's shows, and we would very honestly tell each other what we thought. Like, it was like the only person I could trust was Gino telling me about my show, and vice versa.
Let me stop you for a second. This is a cultural thing. In America, if we got on camera and you were like, fuck Mike, you need to lay off the pasta, that would be like a faux pas. But in many countries in Eastern Europe and in Europe in general, people would be like, look who's getting a little fat over here, and no one is offended, right? It's just like the criticisms or whatever commentary, public commentary, isn't such a taboo. Don't you think? Am I fabricating this idea?
I think that's true to a certain extent, but I think I see a lot of universality of people, especially performers and artists, being a little blind to feedback.
Right. And
I think it's just individuals maybe being insecure about hearing feedback. And I think a lot of people just don't want to look in the mirror and think about it. They just want to keep going.
I just heard someone talking on a podcast or something just this week, and they were talking about how if your friend asks you what do you think about the show, like the night of the show, right after the show is not the time to talk about it, because you are walking off stage with all that. But the very important critical thing that you said was we would get together the next day and talk about it. The next day.
And at coffee, right? Like during the day, sober. Yeah. You know, not that I've never really been in a band, or like there was never alcohol or drugs was never, not that people didn't do alcohol and drugs, but it was never part of the performance or even the after thing. So it's not like it was around being inebriated and not being able to engage in a healthy conversation. You're right. It's not the time, but we would literally get together totally stone cold sober with coffee and like, all right, let's talk about the show and what we liked and what we didn't, what we disliked, you know? And so it was amazing. A really healthy foundation of a friendship where we just respected each other as performers, musicians, songwriters, and we weren't collaborators, right? So it was a really valuable connection, and really wasn't my girlfriend, wasn't my best friend, wasn't my bandmate, wasn't a fan, wasn't my parent. It was a co-band leader giving me feedback, a peer. Yeah, it was a peer review. And
that's
it's interesting because
relationship.
It's a really important relationship. I think it's really important to have that because it helps you develop a dialogue within oneself about what we're doing. Because I think otherwise you're a little rudderless when you're writing your own stuff. And how it's all so close. It's like, I mean, that's how Sage was, period. It was like, I was so in it that I was blind to so many things and so much more out there. And I really should have interacted more with other people. Like I remember Ben Shepherd would come to those shows at the OK Hotel, and he would see me. And I remember, he's somebody who I respected as a bass player, but I
Yeah.
definitely never tried to play his bass lines. But I should have hung more with my peers. You know what I mean? It was like I was afraid of being overly influenced. Somehow with Gino, we had this rapport that worked. And but it's funny, I want to bring up one thing that I talk about sometimes with musicians, and it's that moment when somebody comes up to you after a show, and maybe you had a rough show, and you had a rough show. Right. And somebody comes up and they're like, that was amazing, like a fan or an audience member. And they say, that's so amazing. And something that I've learned over the years is to really validate people's experience of your music, no matter what your personal experience was. Because we're talking about two different things. It's really hard. And I've learned to always to validate their experience and to remember to be humble and remember that it is not about me. At that point, once you get out of your rehearsal space or your songwriting space or wherever you are, and you get up on stage and you're on stage, okay, granted, to a certain extent, it is about you, yourself, your band, and what you're trying to do, but it's all about the audience. It's all about their experience. And
the stage is yours. The room is theirs.
It's theirs. And then when they come and they say, that was amazing, when I've heard myself or I've seen other performers say, no, it was horrible. Like, I just their face falls, and it's the most awkward moment where somebody was just trying to say, I love you. I loved what you did.
Yeah. And
you just disrespect them by saying, no, I sucked, or it was horrible. And it's just such a self-interest thing to say. I believe as a performer, I've learned to just go, like you said, that's not the time to talk about what really happened. The time is right. The next day. And especially not, maybe never the time to talk to a fan of the band or an audience member about what happened, because that they're there for, they probably are there for very complex reasons, but it is nice to have that rapport with somebody. And so that's what Gino was. And so here I am living in a home, running a construction company, raising children. And I remember feeling very specifically dissatisfied with what I'd done musically on one specific point. It was like, I always wanted to play music in Europe. I always heard about my peers going and touring in Europe, and it just seemed amazing. And I was like kind of bummed because Sage had never played Europe. And then Gino shows up at my house one day in this weird purple freaking trench coat. And he's like, let's go for a drive. And he says to me, we want you to join Kultur Shock. Because Masa was the second bass player for Kultur Shock. Also Masa Kobayashi, an incredible bassist. And he had left, and the band felt like they weren't done. And I just felt so honored that he showed up and asked me. And I remember going, okay, of course I would love to. Let me talk to my wife. And we spoke about it. And, here I am, 28 European tours later.
Wow, really?
All over Europe, and all over Russia. And so blessed to have gone to all those places, because in my life growing up, I'd been to a lot of South America. I'd been to a lot of Asia, but I had not traveled in Europe. And we've been everywhere from London to Siberia to, Athens in the south and all through Scandinavia. Just amazing. And so many of those places have that vitality that this whole conversation and you and I meeting started around and was based around that 93, 94, 95, the late 90s, the mid and late 90s of Seattle. It's still so vital in so many of these other places. And Seattle, is definitely not, doesn't feel like LA at all. But when it all blew up, so many bands moved here and so many venues happened, and that vitality was diluted. But that's not the case in a lot of Europe. And
Talk
so
to
I feel
me about,
extremely fortunate.
you were filling the seat of two bass players before you that you really respected. You saw play a lot, you know, and Brad is, I mean, I saw Critters so many times, and I sought him out and got bass lessons from him. I saw him in Austin last
God,
year
I
when I was
wish I
on
had
tour
done that.
also.
Oh,
What a dude.
nice.
Yeah, what a dude.
Nice. Oh,
Um
yes.
so tell me about the process of learning the material, because at that point maybe they had just a couple, 2-3 records. Is that right?
No, they had, I think, 5
Oh, wow.
or
So did
6
you learn 5
huge
full albums of material?
repertoire. No, I learned basically the touring. Basically, they were almost done writing an album. So I learned all the lines that had been written up to that point that I could. There was actually some stuff that I just couldn't play. There's like this one line, there's a couple of lines that Massa was playing that are just so crazy that I couldn't play. And so I adjusted, to
Yeah.
my playing. But so and then there was the rest of the album we finished writing. So there was the album, and then there was the show repertoire, which was, so I probably learned about 28 songs or something.
Wow.
And it was surprisingly natural for me. And I was really shocked because for about 10 years of having this relationship with Gino and going to see, like, I would see every Culture Shock show. It was kind of like mandatory. Like, if I'm playing and Gino, you're in town, you're coming to my fucking show, and vice versa. And, but there was a couple years before this day that I speak about where Gino came over, I kind of finally realized I could actually play this stuff, because I literally, to that point, did not understand the time signatures.
Right.
And how it all worked. I could feel it, but I couldn't logically understand it, which isn't really how I play anyway. So I'm not sure why I thought that I just couldn't play it. But then I remember one year realizing, I think it was actually Guardian Alien opening up for Culture Shock, opening up for Gogo Bordello at Chop Suey. And I remember watching the show and going, oh, I think I actually could play this music. And so it was obviously daunting, but I do play well by ear. And so I learned it all by ear, and then I would work with Val and just worked it up, and it felt natural. And what's funny is that just a couple years ago, my mom did that genetic heritage testing, and it turns out that I have a ton of Balkan heritage and actually some Roma heritage. And it's funny because on tour, a lot of times people would just speak to me in Serbo-Croatian, assuming that I was actually a diaspora, like I was from the Balkans, like Gino and Val. And I had never known that. But as soon as I started playing the music, I definitely could feel the rhythms and the melodies and the logic of it, of the way it worked, the music worked. But coming on the heels of Massa and Brad, I feel like I'm not even in the same arena as those two players. And I feel so grateful that I get to play in that lineage of bass players. Like,
you belong. You're there because you belong there. You are great. And
I
you are that
bring,
good.
I definitely will say I bring myself to my style and my voice to it. And I just feel so lucky to get to carry on this body of music in their footsteps. And one of the things, an awareness that I have expressed in the band, is that this isn't about the individual players. Culture Shock specifically is a whole thing. It is. I don't think you could have Culture Shock without Gino, but it is a body of music, and it is a population of people and it's way bigger than any of the players. And I think that was important because when Masa and Mario left, it was really hard on the band. And you know, I think they felt like this was the end. And I think one thing that's really important to remember is that it's the music's way more important than us. The audience is way more important than us, and it isn't about me.
Right.
And I love connecting with that, with the audience. And another thing that I know from touring with Chris Novoselic and getting to play with Stone Gossard on his first solo album, Bayleaf, and having at least some awareness of their lives and their experiences, like arena sellout tier musicians. We're so lucky. We play, nobody knows who the F we are.
Yeah.
We're not famous. We're not rich. We're, you know, and by the way, Stone and Chris aren't nearly as wealthy as they should be for how famous they are. We play packed, sweaty clubs. And when we do play big festivals, everybody knows it's just the perfect size. It's the perfect size band. And I feel like the luckiest person in the world to get to experience this after all that, after feeling like, music's over, and then getting to go and play through all these countries, to all these communities, all these amazing people. And our audience now are like the children of the children who first were Culture Shock fans. Like they're 20, 19 to 27-year-olds. And there's a lot of older people mixed in there, but it's this amazing thing to feel so relevant in Europe to people, and to get to have this experience, the vitality that you and I felt in 93, 94, 95.
Right.
Playing music, playing to audiences.
Because going to Europe was had such a gravity, like being able to do that. Tell me a little bit about your first trip there, and then tell me sort of how your relationship with traveling across Europe has changed over the years. Because you've got 15 years of traveling there now? Is that right?
Yeah, since 2008.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the band, it was pretty amazing. The very first tour, we played anywhere from, venues with 300 people, festivals with a few thousand people, to playing with Manu Chao in Kazan, Russia, in front of 200,000 people. It was incredible to go to all those different countries. I mean, to play, this is something you never get to do in the United States, play in ancient Roman ruins. That isn't even like a place that people go. It's just, oh yeah, these punk kids are throwing these rock shows at these Roman ruins outside of this small Slovenian town. I mean,
Right.
Just wild. Lots of outdoor shows on really good sound systems. Lots of public, like city funded outdoor venue events that are just great, and almost all the shows are all ages. My kids just saw Culture Shock for the first time because we played at Town Hall. Right. And it was an acoustic show. Like, that's how messed up our whole thing is over here in the United States. So it was a real eye-opener, and just the different cultures and languages and lifestyles, and yet that thread that weaves through it all, just music, and Seattle music specifically, how huge Seattle is. And just hearing my friends on all the sound systems that were testing out their, the speakers while we were getting ready to play, just how central Seattle and the Seattle scene has been, and pivotal and impactful on the entire global, music experience.
It's pretty
really
nuts. Wild. I think that really, I take a lot of that, or I don't think I take it for granted. I think I just don't recognize how much weight.
Yeah.
The environment, my experiential environment, my 20s, basically, the weight and that is the 60s to the kids now, I guess. What's crazier is it's been from when I was 25 to 1969. It's been longer now, you know? It's been longer now. So,
yeah. And I think I just had no idea how big you could get, how big the festivals could be, how big those crowds were. I mean, not even a real, I went and saw Lollapalooza and Clay Elum in 92, right? Butthole Servers, Jane's Addiction, Body Count. You know, it was just such a, what's the name of that? Susie and the Banshees. The Violent Femmes. And, you know, that was only maybe 15,000 people, 20,000 people or something.
Is that right?
And it really wasn't until the internet, right? You couldn't see footage of Pearl Jam playing in Europe. You couldn't, you didn't even know how big or Nirvana,
Roskilde or something. Yeah.
In those years when I was doing stuff with Chris and Stone and like Matt Chamberlain, I had no idea what they had seen, what they had done. Right. The festivals, like the number of people they'd played to at that point. And I also didn't really care. It's weird. Like that wasn't a part of my drive. It was not connected to what I was involved in doing, which was trying to play really good music. But I do know that for me, performing is something I love to do. I don't just love to write good music and play songs. I love to perform and to find that connection between the band and my space as the bass player. I really feel like I am an important part of the cohesion of all the different aspects of the band, and then also the bridge between the band and what we're trying to do with the audience. And I feel like, you know, age and life experience and everything I've experienced in my life has really given me this amazing gift and opportunity to help create this connection and this communication between what we're saying and what we're doing and the audience. And probably the thing that informs it the most is all the shows that I've been to and being an audience member and what do I want to experience and feel and look to on the stage. And it just gives me chills because it's an endless learning. There's endless for me to grow. It's infinite. And it's so important, that work and that space that happens in a performance. And I love being an audience member, and I cherish having that privilege to get to stand on stage and be part of that moment. You know, it's just the most priceless gift that there is.
I love how excited you are about the art of the experience of music, right? Do you, I mean, and I feel like I know the answer to this question already, but do you think that you will play music until the day you drop dead?
100%. 100%. And I feel like, so there was a point where somebody said something to me, somebody who was very important, who I respected so much, who had a lot of control over my life at the time, said, nobody is going to care about you after you're 26. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to care. And it's funny because this also relates to a question you asked earlier, like about when Sage started doing more stuff and growing bigger. It was like, what did you feel like that? Did you feel like this was you said something pivotal, like, was this a once in a lifetime thing? And I think that when you are young, you are ignorant to the fact that Sage is only one thing and only will ever be one thing.
Right.
And I think that even though I do feel like we could have survived and we could have gone on, we did break up. But I think that both Mark and I thought, no problem, I'll just go create another version of Sage over here. and I'll just do the same thing, right? And you get your ass handed to you, right? You're like, no, it's not the same thing. It's not gonna just, you're not just gonna recreate that. You're never gonna have that. So if I can speak to other musicians and people who are part of things, whether people know who the F you are or not, it's precious. If there's something there, it's precious, it's unique, and it's never going to happen again the same way. Never does. And there's another side of that. That body of music, those bands that happened in Seattle, they're still relevant. Like Pearl Jam is still out there. Jerry Cantrell is still doing Alice in Chains. They're still as impactful as they ever were, as wanted as they ever were. Yeah. And I think it's a horrible thing to say to people, like, you're only going to be desired and wanted when you're young. You have this narrow time to do it and to get famous and to blow up. And then you miss that. You might as well just pack it in and go home. I don't believe that.
There are so many ways to live your life as any form of artist that feels fulfilling, so long as you manage your expectation, like, and ask yourself whenever you question what you're doing, why am I doing this? Am I doing this for money or for fame? Or could I, because otherwise, why don't I just go become the regional manager of fucking Taco Time?
Right.
It's way better paying gig.
Yeah.
Way better paying
way
gig.
Less stressful, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, you and I probably feel the same way. Like, I can't help it. I have to do it. And I was not satisfied. I was still writing music before I joined Kultur Shock. I was still wanting to, and Guardian Alien was still playing local shows, but I have to do this, you know? And as much as I have played and performed over the last 15 years in these 28 tours with Kultur Shock, I plan to play and write more in the future. I don't get to play nearly enough because I'm raising children. I got to take care of them. And right. I work crazy days and hours. And on tour, I work crazy hours on tour managing our projects. And I do it for those amazing children. But I am passionate about being an artist and writing a song that touches somebody, and performing even more so. I mean, the thing about performing is that I love it. It gives me so much, especially if I feel like I'm giving something to somebody. I'm giving somebody hope, or I'm giving somebody relief, or I'm giving somebody some insight, or I'm demonstrating that you can break those boxes. You can get out of those borders. You can go through those doors and those fences and those limitations in your life. You have to.
Yeah.
And so that's a really inspiring thing to get to do.
You were talking about being satisfied and being unsatisfied. And the funny thing, I think, is that part of the drive of being consistently creating, is that in order to be satisfied, you have to continue doing it. And the lack of it doesn't create a vacuum of dissatisfaction. It creates a desire for more satisfaction, right? If you
well, yeah, finish that thought. If you
are not performing, you aren't I mean, you're unsatisfied, but only because you are not performing. If you perform, you are immediately satisfied, but the next day you're thinking about your next performance. You're not, dissatisfied. You just, it's almost like a drug, really.
I think it absolutely is. And I think it's based around that word, those two words that are really pivotal: desire and satisfaction. And I think I'm a very desirous person. I have a lot of desire and passion, and I guess that is one way to look at it, is like desire for satisfaction. How do you satisfy that desire and quench that thirst that you have? And so I think, I don't know why I have the desire. I'm not going to question it. I definitely have the desire. And I think there are some musicians who are satisfied with writing the music, recording the music, and really don't need to perform or want to perform or are tortured by performing. I personally have just found through my life as a musical artist that performing is so important to me. And I feel like it's really connected to the whole process of the writing, the recording of the music. I think its primary purpose is the performance of the music. And I think it goes back to the time and the heritage and the genetics of pre-recorded music. Like
Right.
there was thousands of years where all you had was somebody coming and standing and performing for you. And I think that there is something that the digital world and the modern times and everything that we're going through with, you can get anything on your phone at any moment, just dial it up, look it up. But that live, in-person, analog experience of performance, it's beyond anything that will ever be with virtual reality or whatever it's going to be to next. It's beyond all that.
Yeah.
And it's about that moment. And it's a very humbling, it's very human. It's flesh and blood and sweat.
It's like the difference between having the bass happening in some earbuds or standing in front of some subs at a coliseum and feeling a kick drum, the sub from the kick drum hit you in the chest.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Being with people on around you and who they are and the dirt you're standing on, the air you're breathing and what you're seeing and what you're feeling.
You can't tell me that those are similar musical experiences, because they are simply not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you guys are going on tour.
Yes.
You'll be on tour when this podcast episode launches.
Great.
Tell me about the tour. Are you allowed to talk about what else is coming this year?
Yes, I am. We
Give it to me.
are releasing, as we speak, basically, a 2-sided vinyl single on Alternative Tentacles.
So killer.
And which I'm so excited about. I mean, one of my first, most pivotal shows was at the OK Hotel with No Means No. My name is Sage. And I remember at the time thinking, and those guys had gray hair at the time. They didn't give a fuck. They didn't look like punk rockers. And they were the most high energy, most in your face, most punk band I'd ever seen in my life. And they really set the benchmark, right? Like they set the benchmark for me, which I believe Kultur Shock is right up there in terms of, like, doesn't matter the age of the members of the band. We're hitting it like our lives depend on it. And I feel like No Means No really set that bar for us. And then also the label they were on. And Jello Biafra, by the way, is a huge part of Gino and him being here. He was one of the first people Chris Novoselic introduced Gino to, was Jello Biafra. And there's a documentary that's coming out also, I believe next year, about Gino and Kultur Shock and all of this, Jello Biafra and Chris. And that's going to be amazing. The documentary makers have interviewed us in Europe, have a ton of footage from over the years, and they've come over here and interviewed all of us and been to our shows, and it's beautiful. And so there's that documentary coming out. There's this single coming out right now on Alternative Tentacles. We're about, and our next album, which we finished writing and we are finishing recording right now, is coming out on Alternative Tentacles as well.
Awesome.
And they're also releasing our last album, Dreams, on vinyl as well. And so I feel so blessed to be on. You know what? I have to plug this in because I just got an alert that this would not be good. Doing that right now. Looks like we're good. I just feel I can't. When this started to happen, that we were going to be on Alternative Tentacles, I literally was pinching myself because I couldn't ever dream of being on, a different label. So it's really exciting. This tour is amazing. We're going to be, I'm looking at it right here. We're going to be all over Europe. We're starting in Thessaloniki, Greece. We're going all over the Balkans. We're going to be in England for 4 shows, France, Germany, and our last show is on May Day in Rome. So I can get you all the details. And
that's amazing. Do you have and the release date for the single? Do you have a release date?
The release date for the single, I believe, is I'm going to have to come back to you on all that. I wasn't quite prepared with all the information.
That's okay.
I don't want to misspeak. I think it's like literally right now, just got released.
Oh,
so amazing. I'll send you all those links. Yeah. And then we're about to release 2 songs from our new album online first.
Yeah. I listened to the 2 songs you sent. They're great.
Nice.
The Tomorrow is particularly memorable. Right?
I mean, I'm surprised. Yeah. Everybody can relate to that, right?
Of course. Everything about it is is relatable.
Going to quit drugs, but not today.
Yeah.
Going to quit the band, but not today.
Not today.
Tomorrow's a better day. Gonna not be a musician anymore, but not today. Yeah.
Well, I can't even tell you, like, we've talked, 4 times in the last month, and then in the last 20 years, we've probably talked 4 times, which
is mind-boggling to me because I always felt, I don't know, like I knew you so much better, and but then when I actually thought about it, I was like, I actually don't know that much about.
Well, you probably heard, like just being around Doug or whatever, but like when we see each other, it's like, it's not like a, hey, what's up, dude? It's like it's a hug. Like that kind of spirit. Sure. It's that spirit. So you just sort of have the feeling that you are closer to someone in that way. But the truth is, this conversation was incredibly informative, and now all of a sudden I just have this. It's been this like lightning strike moment of understanding you, and your musicality, just like where you're coming from, because it never. I'm always curious how people's musical voices have developed, and yours was one where I very much in the 90s when you were doing Jovi, I very, very much, I was going, I'm going to see Critters Bug, and I'm getting into John Zorn, and like, I'm trying very hard to get involved in deeper musicality, and it, some of it stuck with me, but the foundation of Metallica and Van Halen and AC/DC was just much too deep for me to be fully immersed in art music, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I've really enjoyed our conversation. Like this conversation, I've enjoyed so much. And I feel like we could talk for hours and hours. And that we have so much more to discuss, actually. But we've also talked a lot recently because I first reached out to you. Thank God I reached out to you about helping us find a connection in Paris on this blank on our tour, because it's rekindled this whole connection that I've always felt with you as a peer, as a fellow musician, as somebody. We share so many of the same overlapping circles of things. So I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Well, I'm
And
flattered that you would call me a peer because, like I said, when I got to
oh,
Seattle, I
absolutely.
was going and seeing you play, and I just have respected you for since I knew what a bass was.
Yeah. Well, I feel insanely appreciative of this opportunity to get to talk to you, and really of you being a person who what you've done and what you're doing in discussing all this with people and letting other people's experiences and our experience together as peers and musicians and the tandem life that we've had in music, and then you're broadcasting that to the world. I mean, that is just such a
Well,
selfless.
how interesting are people when you get to hear them talk about themselves, when you get to hear their story, not in a like social media diuretic bleh, sort of way,
Yeah,
but in a like,
yeah.
I grew up like this, or I had a musical
Mhm.
family, and I was the youngest, and I picked up the cello, and it came very natural because whatever. Everyone's got all their own story, and if no one tells it, no one knows.
Right.
That's the
And
way history disappears.
totally. You're so right about that. And it's amazing how many stories we make up about what we think about people and what we've assumed about their backgrounds and how they did things, or even just things that aren't even necessarily true um, about people and their backgrounds. And so it is really such a service that you're doing in this format of
I
telling these
mean,
stories and letting people speak and tell their stories. It's really amazing.
it's
I
not
love it.
selfless. I get off on hearing
Thank
people's stories. I love it.
Yeah. Well,
I love it.
I've enjoyed this conversation a lot. It's really amazing.
Guy, we're
I
you're great. Do you know that?
thank you.
Uh
I appreciate you saying that.
Travel safe.
Yeah.
Congratulations on the
Thank you.
alternative tentacle stuff.
Thank you.
I hope you guys make 100 more records and do 100 more tours. I hope you guys get a bus. I hope, I hope you can
I'm
sleep
not sure I want
overnight.
a bus. I
Oh,
kind of
buddy,
like the band and then jump in a. I mean, when you're on the bus, do you guys sleep on the bus?
shit, yeah.
Man, I don't know.
Oh, it's
I
awesome. You
like.
sleep on the
I
bus and shower at the venue. Get some shower shoes. There's mine right over there. They're ready to get packed. You get some shower shoes, flip flops, and you sleep on the bus. It's amazing. You wake up and you are in the town, and you drink coffee and you walk around wherever you're at. There's none of that. There's
none of.
more,
Yeah,
way
I
more.
guess you don't have to load your shit out, move in, move out every day. Yeah. All right, we'll get a bus. We'll definitely
Well,
get. Hey, let's do something fun though. Let's have a little follow up of like let's connect during the tour a little bit.
I would love it.
You
I
know,
would love that.
like from venues, from the stage, sound check, load in. Let's
I would
show
love
people
it.
what the road is like. Let's get some footage,
We
van
could do
footage
some
out
live
there.
streams.
Let's do some live streams. Chris, the drummer, is he's always got GoPros going and shooting a lot of footage. It'd be really fun to show people the glory, but also the misery, because there's a freaking ton of suffering that is involved in this whole process. A lot of travel, long
Absolutely.
drives,
I
a
imagine
lot of
you have a
moments.
travel plan on your phone.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm on the East
I'll
Coast,
send it
so
to you.
it's not as
Yeah.
drastic a time change as the West Coast. So just
No, it's a great time change.
text
Great time
me,
change.
and then
Yeah.
we can do like like an Instagram live or something, and then it
Yeah.
stays there, and you can
Yeah.
show me around where you're at. I'm into it. I'm super into it. I would love to
Sounds
play
great.
music with you someday. We should
Oh,
make
you know
a
what? I
we
was
should
gonna
make
say that. I was gonna say that. I never say this. And this is a fact. I really don't say that to people because I don't freaking have time. I can't wait to play music with you. I know we tried to, and it just didn't happen because probably we were both out of town most of the time. But I really want to do that. I think that'd be really fun.
You know what I
Hopefully we
want to
can be
do?
in the same city. What
Two
do you want to do?
bass,
What do you want to play?
two bass band,
Two bass band?
two basses. Yeah.
I love it. Do you know about Tone Dogs?
No.
Do you know about Tone Dog? Oh my God. So I first met Amy Denayo, who is this,
Yeah.
the goddess of saxophone and so many other instruments in Culture Shock, playing with her at the Satyricon in Portland with Sage, as her and Fred Chandler both played bass. And it was two bass players and a drums, and Amy sang. And I was just like, oh my, I loved it. I loved it. That'd be fun, especially if one of us was playing like a tenor bass.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Or whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm into
Let's
all
do
of
it.
it.
Yeah.